Good morning. Barry Bryson here. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're in the book of Ecclesiastes, and we're going to read chapter 7, verses 21, verses 19 through 24. We're in this middle section. And there's still a great deal of darkness. We're not really going to point the raft home until chapter 11 and then make our way to the conclusion. It's going to get darker before it gets a little lighter, but he is making headway. He's coming to some conclusions. Two are better than one. He's come to that conclusion. It's good to do your best for its own sake. He's realized that too. It's good to enjoy the gifts God has given you in the moment that you have received them. He's learned that. And then last time we were together, verse 18, the one who fears God comes out from whatever happens. Fearing God is the answer. It's always the best course, which will be the conclusion of the whole book. But he's already told us that here in chapter 7. So let's begin reading with verse 19. We're going to read through verse 24. Wisdom gives strength to the wise more than 10 rulers who are in a city. Surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. Do not take to heart all the things that people say, lest you hear your servant cursing you. Your heart knows that many times you yourself have cursed others. All this I have tested by wisdom. I said, I will be wise, but it was far from me. That which has been is far off and deep, very deep. Who can find it out? Well, again, this is an enigmatic passage, especially the end, because he says that which is far off, well, has already been is far off and deep, very deep. But he says at the very beginning of the book and repeats, there's nothing new under the sun. We'll talk about that here in just a second. Wisdom gives strength to the wise man more than 10 rulers who are in a city. This is a theme throughout. He's going to revisit it again in chapter 9, verse 13. How a poor wise man in a very small city is stronger than a mighty king with a conquering army. And so he's not, there are times when he says, what's the point of wisdom? Wisdom, you can't attain it, which he does even in this passage, but he does have faith in godly wisdom and asserts it almost every third or fourth verse in this book. Reminds us who we are and that we are flawed. That's going to lead up to what he says in verses 21 and 22. You are not perfect. Just get that through your head right now. You're not perfect. And then he says, do not take to heart everything everybody says about you. Just remember all the things you said about other people over the years. Do you want to hold them held against you? It's such a wonderful bit of wisdom. And it connects us with what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 7, that the measure we use against others, it will be used against us as well. And so he's saying, listen, how many times did you let yourself off the hook for saying awful things about other people, and yet you want them to be held to account to what they said about you? Wonderful bit of practical wisdom. And then he says, all this I've tested by wisdom. And he said, I will be wise. And of course, Solomon was given godly wisdom, a godly measure of it, because it's what he asked for. And we're all promised wisdom if we ask for it. James tells us that in James, the first chapter. But then he says, that which has been as far off and deep, very deep, who can find it out? I don't think that he is contradicting what he said before about things, nothing being new under the sun. Just because something has already been done doesn't mean people realize that or understand it. People forget the past. They just do. And there's so much in the past to understand, so much context that is lost and cannot be revived, recaptured. And so how well can we ever know someone from their biography 100 years, 1,000 years later? It's such a wise caveat that he gives us. That as Paul will say in 1 Corinthians 13, we know in part. We see through a mirror only dimly. And I think that's what he's saying here too. As wise as he is, his wisdom is limited, as he is a human being and he is limited. There's not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. So all wisdom that we need, that will create in us humility. Humility which is necessary to wisdom and necessary to love and necessary to all other Christian virtues. Godly virtues, I should say, because we're in the Old Testament. To me, that's what he's getting at, verses 19 through 24. This deep, deep humility in the face of our limitations and our own unrighteousness. Okay, not a woman-friendly passage next time. He says some unkind things about the ladies. We'll read that next time and finish up chapter 7. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.